Where in your life do you or don't you have or see freedom?
Oh, I think freedom is a concept that covers many things. It's an interesting one, and I think it's a one that everybody should consider. And I'll tell you now that my background, I have a degree in philosophy from Newcastle University, and that's moral philosophy covers exactly that topic. And I was fascinated by the Victorian philosopher John Stuart Mill, who defined what freedom meant. And I'm going to quote him, because it's the kind of thing you should never forget, and I've never forgotten it. The only freedom worth the name is the freedom to seek your own good in your own way, provided you don't impede or prevent others achieving theirs. That's so simple, it's never been overtaken in my mind. So what you call freedom, and I call freedom, has constraints. Freedom of speech, everything you say or do has consequences. So it's never free of consequences. The law governs freedoms by explaining what the consequences are legally, and morally you might have to decide what they should be yourself. If you don't, others might actually remind you. So freedom is a very interesting concept and has to be limited. We live in a free society. What do we mean by that? We mean just what I've said. You're free to do whatever you wish in the world, provided you pay the price. And the price could be limited by the law, limited by rules, limited by an institution that you belong to that has regulations. You can't get away from it. Freedom of speech, what does that mean? Am I free to shout fire in a crowded cinema? No. So there are constraints, aren't there? There always are constraints to freedom. There must be. Otherwise society would break down completely into anarchy. So there has to be limits on freedom. That's my short answer. Do you want a longer one, or do you have other things to ask me about it?
Does judgment from society restrict your freedom to present yourself how you wish? If so or not, why?
Yes. I have to. I'm an elected member, a councillor. When I and actually, curious thing about being an elected member, a councillor, which I am, is that you can never not be a councillor. You can't actually. I'm speaking not as a councillor now, but as an individual myself. That's how I'm speaking. Well, I can't do that. I've got to actually present myself as though I was an elected member, which means think about what you say, think about what the consequences might be, and think about how your views might be taken into account by others. So don't be offensive, try to be balanced, listen, but listening does not mean agreeing, and make a judgment, ultimately yourself, having balanced up the pros and cons. That's how I work.
How do you think freedom has changed since World War II or in your lifetime?
In my lifetime, thank you. Yes, I wasn't around in World War II, but in my view, certain things have improved. For example, I was in the military. I was in the Royal Air Force for 25 years, and that, of course, constrains your behaviour. But certain things did change. Let me think of a really good example. In the 60s, up until I can't remember when the law was changed, it might be the late 60s, you could be imprisoned if you were gay. Imprisoned. It was illegal. And the RAF, as an officer, you'd be discharged immediately if that emerged. And if you were an airman or a woman, you would also possibly risk being imprisoned. You might be shocked by that, but it's not long ago. And I like to think I had a role in stopping it because it was perfectly obviously wrong. And the reason we did it in the military was we said that people might be subject to pressure from our enemies if this emerged. Well, that's only because we'd made it illegal. And that was changed. So that's a change in freedom. You know, freedom to say or go. I always thought what consenting adults, if you like, want to do in private isn't nobody else's business. I've always known that. So that freedom has certainly improved. Racism of the kind that certainly was common in my youth has been suppressed. In fact, it's gone to the point where you have to be very careful not to be, shall we say, what you say mustn't sound as though it has a racist element to it. And that's a great change from my youth. These are two major issues. And in minor aspects, they have as well. Motoring law, how you drive your car, how you operate, and the rules of the road, these have gradually developed. So freedoms are limited by rules increasing with popular consent. There's a word, democracy is the freedom to make choices about who governs you. There's a great phrase I remember saying, democracy sweetens the bitter pill of servitude with the sugar of consent. How about that? Do you like that?
How do things such as race, gender, disability, sexuality, and wealth affect your or other people's freedom?
In this country, I can only speak for this nation, I would say that I've more or less answered that, I think, before, in that there have been massive changes for the better, and they have been accepted by society. It was clearly just a consequence, shall we say, of codes of behaviour that were generally accepted. When I was a boy, it was known that certain people were gay, and that was just overlooked. But now it's not even commented upon, I don't think. Not even an issue. Race is becoming more of an issue thanks to the confusion of very complex issues like immigration, which inevitably stirs up racist views. And that is a real problem of the day. And have I got a solution for that? I really don't. And I don't know that any government has, other than hopefully balancing what the nation's needs are with what you would call the basic requirements of humanity and how we deal with human beings.
Can you tell me about a place or places that you do or don't have freedom?
Places where you have freedom. Well, I think this country is as free as you're likely to get. There are places where you certainly won't be free, and this is not a party political comment, but what happens when it goes wrong is you move towards what I would call a totalitarian state, where it becomes a police state, so that when people want something, but the state doesn't want them to have it, then you either get a black economy or it has to be policed. And you end up, as I recall, East Germany when I was in the Royal Air Force, where before the wall came down, and I was in Berlin before the wall came down, the difference between East Germany and West Germany was enormous, and you knew it as soon as you went in, which you were allowed to do. And those changes have come about for the better because it's not a police state anymore. It's a democracy where people have a choice and a say, and the say is what it is. You might not like the say, but there's an argument that says you can't reach a wrong decision democratically, only one you don't like.